Welcome to Untold Radio Network Studios, Monday night, Pine Island Research. It's great to see so many of you popping in the chat already. I appreciate you choosing us as your way to spend a Monday night, because I think it's going to be a good one. Most of you are familiar with my guest tonight, so I'm pretty excited about it. Those who are in chat, anyways, on a lot of the shows that we see each other in, we'll recognize him. Some of those listening on podcast maybe aren't familiar with who he is, but you're going to learn an awful lot tonight. Tristan Yolton, known as Kaiju Ninja in many of the chats that you see around the community on Facebook, or I'm sorry, on YouTube. And what I love about Tristan is not just on my show, but on all of the shows that I find myself watching, he asks the most inquisitive questions in chat, well thought out questions. And there's a lot of reasons why maybe some people ask questions. Maybe they're trying to open up kind of steer the conversation in a different direction, or maybe they're asking just for entertainment purposes. I believe Tristan asks questions because he's truly trying to look at all the plausible options to explain the things that he sees happening when he's out researching and out in the field. He's open-minded, taking into consideration what everybody else's opinion may be on a subject, looking for opportunities to maybe refine his opinion. And that's one of the reasons why we titled the show Refining the Approach, because we need to refine it. If we keep repeating everything that's been done in the last 60 years, we are not going to move the ball off the 5-yard line from where the Patterson-Gimlin experience left it. We just aren't moving this thing. We've got to consider different ways of doing things when it comes to research and when it comes to the way we think. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to have Tristan on tonight. Just wanted to also mention that there's so many things going on in the news lately, and events going on around all the areas that many of our listeners are in. This morning on Coffee Time, me and Doug Hychek had a great visit. You guys will want to go back and check that show out if you didn't see it here on the Untold Radio Network. Talked about the northern lights we're experiencing up here in the Dakotas and Minnesota and Wisconsin, across that latitude. We talked a lot about the tornadoes that we've been having down in Mississippi and Georgia. Hearts go out to those folks. There's been an awful lot of devastation down there with that. And unfortunately, that's probably not the last we're going to see of it. We're entering that season, the spring season, in which we have some pretty volatile weather patterns across the Midwest and throughout the South. So, for anybody who was in any of the paths of those storms, just know that we're thinking about you and keeping you in our prayers, lifting you up. Yeah, but we had some great discussion this morning on a lot of different things. Doug talked a lot about the moon and the different ways that the moon affects our lives here, not just with the tide and things like that, but also the way that it affects, it's the cause of an awful lot of things, but it keeps everything in this perfect correlation, because if it wasn't exactly where it was positioned, we'd pretty much all of our sea life would sink to the bottom and be dead. So it is crazy, this natural dynamic that we exist in, and Doug really goes in depth on that. It was a great discussion. But without any further ado, I'm going to bring Tristan into the chat here. Hey, buddy.
Everybody. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for taking the time to join us.
Sure.
So, did you have a good weekend, or was it too quick? Or
Yeah, like you said this morning, it seemed like it went by way too fast. Yeah,
yeah, hopefully we're getting to where those of us who live in these snowy regions can start getting rid of the cabin fever and feel like we're actually doing more in a weekend than we're actually doing right now. So,
for sure. And up here, we're supposed to get some pretty bad windstorms tomorrow, so definitely
wow.
not looking forward to that. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at least this, like the snow that we have left here is I mean, it could blow 100 miles an hour. It's not going to blow the snow around. It's pretty much wet snow and on the decline. We're starting to see a little more grass around some of the rivers. The faster moving rivers are starting to open up a little bit. And,
Mhm.
but yeah, and God, we got so many people popping in the chat already. It's going to be a great night. But for those who maybe don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, kind of how you got this interest developed and started in the subject of Sasquatch. Fill us in a little bit.
Okay. I live in Washington State. I've lived here all my life so far, and I was born in the '80s, and I grew up in the '80s and '90s. And growing up, I did watch Harry and the Hendersons and a bunch of the Bigfoot documentaries that were out from the '70s and into the '80s. I'll just name a few, such as Bigfoot, the Mysterious Monster with Peter Graves, 1975. In Search of Bigfoot with Robert W. Morgan. That was also in 75, I believe. And and like what Brent said on your last show, I mean, unsolved mysteries, sightings, mysterious encounters, and all those kind of shows that were on the TV. I watched all of those growing up, and I also went to the library a lot and checked out a bunch of Bigfoot books and paranormal encrypted books and read all those. And I was excited to look at all the pictures that they had in the books. Like what does Bigfoot look like, and of course the Patterson film as well. That really intrigued me, seeing that on these documentaries. So the other thing is I really like dinosaurs and monsters such as Godzilla, obviously. So I like all these creatures and all these prehistoric things, and the idea of Bigfoot and other cryptids, even like the Loch Ness monster, that really intrigued me, and I just had a fascination with them. But growing up, I never really thought of going after them or looking for them. It was just always a nice little fascination that I've had. And for me, that all changed in 2015 when my father heard some whoops up behind my house here up on this hill. And what happened was he told me he was taking the garbage out in the morning, one early morning before he was going to work, and he heard two whoops communicating with each other on two sides of the hill behind our house, and he thought that was very odd. And as he was going to work, there was a herd of elk in the middle of the road, all looking up at the hill from where he heard the whoops were coming from. And so he actually had to swerve around the elk that were all in the road, and then he went to work. And then I'd say about a week or so later, he mentioned it to me and my mother. We were probably watching a Bigfoot show or something. Maybe that's why he mentioned it. But he mentioned it to us that he heard these whoops up on the hill, and me and my mother went up on the hill the first thing we could, and we put a jar of peanut butter up there, and I put a recorder up there as well as a some peanut butter crackers, and we left it up there for a night. And then the next morning, I went up there to retrieve the recorder, and the peanut butter jar. It looked like something possibly put its hand inside the peanut butter jar and scooped some peanut butter out of the jar and ate it, because you can actually see some finger holes inside the peanut butter that was in the jar, as well as
Hmm.
possible dermal ridges on the side. And the peanut butter crackers were eaten. I think there's like six of them or so inside this plastic wrapper, but the wrapper was neatly opened. It wasn't torn open like like a bear or some other wild animal would do. So
Yeah.
we thought that was very weird. And and the recorder I had up there, it was strapped to a stump with a bungee cord, and there was no scratch marks or teeth marks or anything on it. So when I saw it, when I picked it up, I didn't think, oh, well, I guess they didn't mess with it, or maybe you didn't see it. Well, that as soon as I went home to listen to a recorder, about an hour after we left, wherever this thing was, comes in, and then the first thing you hear is like a big whoop kind of a sound. It's like a weird feedback sound, and then you hear a wood knock and a whoop in the background, and then I'd say about a minute or so later, you hear this thing, whatever it is, come in and start eating them. You can actually hear the crackers being opened and eaten. And then whatever this thing is, I think it sees my recorder because it makes a really, really loud woo, like a big growl, like possibly it sees it. And then you hear it come over to the recorder, and then it just messes with the recorder and growls a lot while messing with it. And then it just leaves the recorder. The sound just stops. So whatever it was did not like what I put up there in terms of the audio recorder, and just left it alone.
When I look at the Google file that we are sharing, and I see all of the different audio clips that you've captured over the years now, have you had different reactions that you've noticed where it seems to interact with the recorder itself? Or was that kind of an isolated thing that time?
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, if we could say that was a Sasquatch that did this, that is the only time I've ever really had it come up to the recorder and actually mess with it and growl at it. All the other possible times where I might have possibly captured them on audio, you can just hear them talking, and then maybe they'll throw like a rock or something at it. Like you'll hear like a honk on the recorder.
But they don't
I've
really
never
seem
actually
to approach it.
Yeah. So that's a different kind of approach. But that first initial thing, if that was a Sasquatch, that is the only time I've ever heard it actually mess with my equipment like that, physically touch it, as opposed to throwing something at it. So it's interesting that maybe different individuals just have different reactions to it.
Well, I think that's one of the most interesting things when I listen to Blaine Hycheck's audio recordings at Angleworm Lake, way up in the Boundary Waters. He was there with his girlfriend. They had camped for 3 nights, and he has audio recordings of this thing throwing large rocks into the lake, throwing stuff at their tent, wood knocking. But it also, and assuming this is a Sasquatch, again, we've got to make that assumption, I guess, to have the conversation.
Sure, definitely.
This thing was inquisitive enough that it walks right up to where that audio recorder is simply sitting in plain view on a picnic table, and just taps on it, thump, thump, thump. And I thought, like it's trying to figure it out. And this, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I mean, one of the things that me and Doug have had hours and hours of conversations about is the different people's thoughts on what a Sasquatch could be capable of sensing, whether it's an IR flash. Get a lot of different opinions on that. Whether or not they can sense a battery presence, you get a lot of different opinions on that. You can probably come up with 5 or 6 things that people all have an opinion, but there's no proof of any of it, and with an audio recorder, I mean, it would have to be able to sense a battery presence to really detect that an audio recorder is there. There's no flash going on. There's no, it's really not making any sound, really. But, for it to be inquisitive enough to walk up and tap something, it makes you wonder, or in your case, it seems to have displayed a different emotion. It's, with it making sounds, like maybe it's frustrated that this thing's here, or maybe it's, it doesn't sound inquisitive necessarily. It sounds more unhappy with the fact that this thing's here. Whereas Blaine's experience, the way that it just goes up and taps on it, it's like, what is this thing, So that's one of the most interesting things I think about audio recorders is, one, it's tedious to go through hours and hours of captured audio, as you know.
It
I mean,
is.
when I see all the audio files you shared with me, I think, okay, you got to times that by like 100 as far as, or more, as far as the time that you're listening to nothing, waiting to hear something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I love listening to audio because it's sometimes I think it almost tells us a little bit more about a situation than maybe video is capable of, to be honest with you. I know that can work both ways, but um, to hear, and especially the new audio recorders, I assume you've got a pretty decent one. I mean, these directional mic'd Zoom and different audio recorders that are out there, you can hear a wood knock that you can hear in stereo that sounds quite a ways away, and it sounds like it's, and when you hear another one that sounds closer, you can tell it's from a different direction, even because these audio mics are crossed and picking it up in different directions, you know.
Correct. Yeah.
But
Where the funny thing is that that recorder that I was using for that the thing up on the hill was a very old recorder. It was a very old digital recorder. It wasn't even one of the newer ones that we have now. I mean,
yeah,
that was 2015 when this happened, and so
when you put
well,
an audio recorder out, do you usually camouflage it in, or do you just set it kind of in obvious places, or?
yeah, well, so like the first time I put it out there, I just like kind of like what you're saying with I think Blaine's recorder. I just
Yeah,
put it out there without any covering or anything on it. I just had it strapped to a bungee cord, and maybe I think there might have been a light on, so maybe whatever this thing was, maybe saw the light on it. I don't know, but I do
yeah,
usually, but yeah, since then I do usually cover my recorders with moss or something like that.
yeah.
As well as I put them in plastic bags as well because because of precipitation or anything. I don't want that getting inside the recorder. So I put them in little plastic baggies, and I use a bungee cord. I strap them to a tree or a stump or something, and then I also put moss on the recorder as well to try to hide them.
Yeah. I think Blaine kind of uses a dual approach. He sets one in an obvious area right on a picnic table that's, 7-10 foot from his tent. And then he hangs one from buried in a pine tree that's
Mhm,
20
mhm.
yards over. And kind of the idea of doing it is, I think in his mind, is that if they're curious enough to be watching us, they might be looking for opportunities of when can they be close and when can't they be close. And if you're out sitting around a campfire or something, you don't want your audio recorder maybe right next to you. Maybe you want it 20 or 30 yards away. Whereas if you're going to retire into the tent for the night, or you're going to during the day leave your campsite for a few hours on a hike somewhere, and you go place yourself 2 miles away from your campsite, it may view that as an opportunity to just walk right into your campsite. Then you'd probably want it sitting right on the picnic table,
Absolutely
So,
right.
uh,
Right. Well, the other thing people should be aware of though is that bears are, I think they're attracted to the batteries. So you kind of have to be careful of when leaving out a recorder that a bear might not get to it as well. Because I can't tell you how many
yeah.
I can't tell you how many recorders I've lost because of a bear has found my stuff. So people should be aware of that if they're gonna be putting recorders out there.
Yeah,
That
2 years ago, I started with 7 audio recorders, and I'm down to 4 of them now because
yeah,
I've had 3 of them destroyed, in northern Minnesota by bears. Just
yeah,
they make them. I often thought about putting them in some type of a pelican case that had holes drilled in it and where maybe just the microphones were exposed, but, I don't know. I have game cameras too that get destroyed that are supposed to be, chew resistant to bears. Nothing is chew resistant
right.
to a
Yeah,
bear.
yeah, they'll find those too. They found our game cameras and plot watchers as well. So
Sure.
yeah, people just need to be aware the bears will find their stuff if they're hungry.
Yeah.
And
Well, and it's so scent oriented. I think one of the best things we can do is I keep a lens the disposable Zeiss lens wiping things, not only for my glasses, but I'll keep them, disposable ones. They come in little single pockets. You can buy like 100 of them at a time for like $9. I'll keep those in my pocket, and right before I'm going to leave an audio recorder or a game camera, I'll wipe it down with a lens cloth cleaner just to try to kill any scent that's on it. Because bears, I mean, look, you eat a ham sandwich in your truck on the way to a hunting stand, and then you go hang a camera out there and come back 3 days later and it's destroyed. It smelled the ham sandwich you ate on the way there from the truck. I mean,
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
incredible how their scent is so amplified. But so, and also, if anybody in chat wants to ask Tristan any questions, just put them in all caps. I'm trying to star them, so if I don't ask them right away, towards the end, I'm going to we'll pull them up and kind of do a Q&A session at the end too. But if somebody's asking one and it's kind of going along with what we're talking about at the moment, I might just share it as you put it up there. So. But so the areas that you go out and research, what goes behind the idea of picking these areas? I mean, do you look at encounter reports and identify high value target areas that you feel, or is it more based on personal experience? This is where I've had some luck in the past, so you just keep going to those areas?
Well, so like for the example on the hill up here, I was thinking if these are Sasquatch, that it could have been a travel route, and I was thinking that they like probably to be up in high places, and so that's my thinking is that the places that I try to find, for me, there's a lot of woods, a lot of mountains around me, so I try to pick spots that possibly have like a water source nearby, and then there's also a high spot where something can maybe travel to and from, up high without even being detected by people, down below. And so that's how I try to find my areas around me. Is I try to find the high spots that maybe I can that maybe I can go hiking up to, not too high, but just to a certain level, and then I can maybe find a flat area to walk around in. And also, I try to look for. We have a lot of elk and deer around here. I try to look for that too. If there's a lot of elk and deer population, as well as water, a food source, all the sources of a big animal like a Sasquatch would possibly need. I try to look for that, and I try to zero in on those kinds of areas. Now,
I think there's something to that, especially the parallel of those areas. If you can find a well-used elk game trail, so to speak, looking 50 yards running parallel to that in the tree lines, looking at those areas, or if you can find a game trail that actually passes a near area of high ground, to look up on that high ground area as a spot that maybe they would observe an ambush from or something like that. You can kind of, if you put yourself into what their mode of thinking would be in trying to take down a large game animal, just walking along the trail might not be the right thing to do. I mean, it's obviously going to parallel them probably in a tree line. At least that's what a human would do if you were trying to keep up and track them. But also, if you're trying to ambush them to actually harvest one, you're probably going to put yourself in more of an observatory position,
Right, exactly. Well, I personally think I've found possible footprints along trails, even like game trails. So maybe they're actually following the elk or looking for their prints.
Sure.
I personally do think I might have found prints along those kind of trails as well. So even trails that maybe even people go on too. I mean, because the thing is, it's like when you go to bed at night, what goes on out there? Sasquatch could be anywhere. It can walk anywhere, basically, where it wants to. So that's another thing I think people should be thinking of as well. So.
Yeah. So out of all of your audio files, which one should we start playing first? Do you have
Well, we can, if you want, we could try starting with that very first recording I was talking about. And let's see if I can bring it up here.
the bumping chorus audio?
Well, I was thinking of the one that I captured up on the hill. Let's see if I can find that.
Let me see here.
Oh, if you go into under growls, infrasound and growls, that's the recording.
Okay.
You can play that one.
So just so everybody understands, we're both looking at the same Google file, and he has got a lot of stuff in here, and we're going to try to get to a lot of it tonight. But so I've opened up the growls, and there is
like an
infrasound and growls or
Yeah.
growling.
No, yeah, the infrasound one is the one that captured up on the hill. So if you can try to play that. So again, that recorder was not. I mean, when you look at the recorder, the actual physical recorder, there's no scratches, no marks, or anything on that thing. So I was very shocked to hear that on there, as well as that big whoomp sound I was talking about that happens in the beginning. I don't know what's up with that.
Well, first of all, I want to kind of preface all of these conversations we're going to have with, I don't want anybody to assume that Tristan's coming on here saying this is Sasquatch. What he's saying is these are interesting audio recordings I've got that seem to display stuff that raises some question marks as to what it could be. The fact that you don't have chew marks and that it's not destroyed in some way makes me almost by default lean away from it being a bear, first of all. The other thing would be there's something interesting that I hear in this, and it's right before it starts messing with the case of the audio recorder or the body of the audio recorder. You hear what almost sounds like beads jingling or dangling from a string. And I don't know if that's the straps. I mean, if it was, the ends of the straps that maybe it's messing with before it starts interacting with the actual recorder itself.
Yeah, it could be.
It kind of sounds like that, but it has a clicking sound, like it's almost like beads on a string. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if there's a little plastic buckle on a strap or something, maybe that's what that is it's just kind of you hear that tinking against it or against the tree or against its hands or whatever. But
right,
that was interesting before the heavy interaction. The other thing is, if it was a bear, I've got some bear interactions with an audio recorder before and with game cameras that are recording audio. And one of the interesting things that I find is when it gets it in its mouth, the vocal sounds that you hear as it's moaning or grunting and stuff drowns out everything to where you can't really hear it messing with the case itself. I mean, it is so devastating loud when that microphone and you hear the, that kind of stuff.
right.
It is so loud that the clicking and the clanking and the messing around with the you almost don't hear that at all once it starts doing that. And so it makes me think this really wasn't in the mouth of anything, even though it sounds like it kind of is. I think it's just that the mouth is up close to it. But that I just say that out of my experience. I can't speak definitively on that, but
yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you. I mean, I would have expected teeth marks or something on it, but it wasn't damaged in any kind of way. I also thought it was very. I also thought it was really interesting when it does that initial roar, almost as if it notices the recorder when it does that. Like a surprised growl or like whoa kind of a thing. That's how I perceive.
Or maybe that's when it notices the little red light on it or something. Exactly. Like, maybe it's messing casually with those straps that are dangling or whatever, and then it sees that little light and it reacts that way to it. Or who knows? That's all speculation.
Yep.
But I'm okay having the conversations that involve speculation because you're looking for an explanation and an answer here. So,
absolutely.
If we aren't going to consider speculatively what could be the plausible explanation, then we aren't going to get anywhere,
Right.
But again, I mean, this isn't us, you or me or anybody saying this is Sasquatch. This is simply saying there's things about that recording that make you lean a little bit away from it being a bear. There's no damage to it. It's not. And quite honestly, those microphones, the metal encasing over the actual microphone structures that have the little tiny holes in them or the screening on them, man, it's not hard to damage that stuff.
No.
I mean, with your fingernails, you could probably do some damage to it.
Sure. Definitely.
So,
yeah, I mean, it doesn't, for a bear to bite into it, I mean, it takes nothing for it to bite into it. So it's
odd.
It is for sure.
What audio should we listen to next?
Well, let's take a look here. Well, if you want, we could start with the chorus audio if you'd like.
Okay.
If you want to play the one from Search for Sabe, that's from Tate Horowitz's documentary where he used Upsert. Shout out to Tate. Good job, Tate, on that documentary.
Yeah, that was a great documentary.
Yeah.
Oh, now I got it.
Oh, it's doing that thing? Oh boy.
Hold on just a moment here. Let me
Okay.
see if I can work around this.
Well, I can maybe talk about it before he played if you'd like. Like
Hold
set it
on.
up.
Yeah, if you want to talk about it, I'll mess with it here and get it.
Sure. So in July 2020, July 17th, 2020, my mother and I went camping up in this area near Mount Rainier. It's a big lake. It's a well-known area for Sasquatch researchers. And at 2 o'clock it was just me and her in this camping area. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden these vocals started happening while I was sleeping, and it woke me up. And luckily I had a Tascam recorder. See if I can get it real quick. I had a Tascam recorder. I had this guy running on my mother's truck about 20 feet away from us from the tent that we were in. And this was on her truck. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, these various multiple vocals started going off. The first vocal was like a male kind of a sounding voice. And then you would hear possible female and maybe possible youngster voices chiming in after that. And this is the best way I can describe it is like a big chorus. And these were happening all around the area around us, basically, and from different directions. It wasn't all in one direction. And these vocals went on for a half hour, pretty much nonstop. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And just listening to the audio, though, I mean, just on its own, its raw form doesn't do it justice. It was incredibly loud to hear and just unbelievable. And it's I wanted to make a disclaimer that everything I present tonight, and kind of like what you were just talking about with that other audio, I can't claim any of this to be Sasquatch, but
No, Joe makes a good point. For those, I like to read these comments out loud rather than just show them, because those listening on podcast can't see them. But
sure.
Joe from the Bigfoot Atheist Inquiry says, can't personally say it couldn't be a Bigfoot, just can't definitely say it is. So what I am left with on this particular audio is maybe, like most audio, actually.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly true. I mean, but I think they're helpful to listen to. I mean, everybody's going to come up with, you could play any audio and you'll have, if you had 20 people listen to it, you're going to have probably 15 different takes on what it could have been that caused it.
Right.
But then again, you can play some pretty dang good video and you're going to probably be split 50-50, to where half of them think it's CGI or faked and the other half thinks it's real and it's got to be Bigfoot, right? I mean, it's just
exactly,
that's always going to be the case. So I'm going to bring this up and play the 15-second edited one where it kind of comes down. Before I play the rest of that, Tristan, I want to ask you,
sure.
When you leave these out and go back and get them, do you kind of pay attention to what the weather was like and, things like that while they were out, take some notes on that? I'm curious, do you feel that, I don't know what time of year it was that you captured this audio, but was there a lot of moisture in the air? I mean, was it like, I don't want to say foggy, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you hear high-pitched sounds from a distance in air that's got a lot of moisture in it, it kind of adds this haunting type echoiness to it. You know what I mean? It feels like that's present here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this recording was taken in July of 2020, in the middle of July, like July 17th to be exact,
Hmm.
2020 at 2 a.m. in the morning. And to be honest, Jeff, I don't recall what the weather conditions were like that night because I
Mhm.
at the time I wasn't really paying attention to that kind of thing, and now I do. I know people have told me I should pay attention to that kind of thing.
Well, if
I
when
won't
you're
say.
getting when you're in an area that you're getting some audio recordings, and a lot of times it's just, I gotta get this back out there. You kinda get tunnel vision on it a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, I was in my tent during this time, and I just didn't notice what the night looked like. But I will say it wasn't raining. It never rained that day. In fact, it gets really hot up there during this time of year. I mean, the mosquitoes are terrible up there. So I would say it was pretty humid. As far as the moon being out or not, I have no idea. I can't remember that, but there was no precipitation. But I think it's possible that at least one of these individuals might have been at the actual lake doing this, at least. So maybe that has something to do with it as well.
Or it was, canine or something like that at the lake too, but you're saying from the direction or the
Yeah,
distance, that's how what you felt.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna play a little more of it here. I thought I was gonna play a little more of it.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's not playing.
That's weird. Maybe it's trying to catch up or something.
Hmm.
Maybe if you went back out, yeah, maybe
Yeah,
you'll.
I'm gonna pull it
Yeah.
back in and bring it back to the same spot here. Oh, now it wants to
Oh,
give me
that's
that message. I don't know why it does that. I don't know
yeah.
if I have this Google file open for so long that it eventually does that to certain.
Yeah, I
But
get
I've
the
had
same
it be
thing when I
where,
do that.
yeah, it's still not there now.
Oh, we could try another one. Oh, yeah, that's weird that it does that.
Yeah,
Not sure what's up with that.
I don't want to play the unedited one because we'll probably be listening to more of pauses between them.
Yeah, that's
It's
that's more of a
quite a bit
20-minute
of.
version. Yeah, the edited one, I just try to chop up and just get to the vocals because my mother and I talk during the unedited one, and I didn't want people to hear that. I just wanted to just get right to the sweet stuff, basically. So that's why there's an edited version.
So this is the chatter one of the chatter ones. Play
Cool.
it again. That's interesting.
Yeah, so kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I think again, if this is a Sasquatch, I think it might have thrown something at the recorder. Maybe that's what the bonk is.
Or hit it with a stick or something. But
Yeah, right. Hit
what
it with
the most interesting part is what appears to be syllables being projected after it. I'll play it one more time.
Sure.
I don't know if that's, you could explain that as being something else, a known animal, but it's almost like there's two of them because there's one sound being projected and then there's a higher short one right behind it. So it almost, I don't think one could just, without making human type sounds, it'd be really weird to imagine that an elk or a deer or a whatever, a wolverine could make that sound and quickly follow it with that different syllable change like that. I'll
Right.
play it one more time so people can. Yeah, it sounds like two different things almost.
Yeah, it sounds like one goes, yeah, and then something responds to that in the background.
It
Like a
sounds like,
further.
yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Now, so these recordings, these particular speech recordings were recorded in the same area as the chorus ones, but not at the same camp. but the same general area. And these were recorded up on a hill behind our campsite. And this area behind our campsite, it's all wooded. There's no campers back there. It's all woods. And our thinking is that if these are Sasquatch, that these might be juveniles coming in to watch us at the campfire down below this hill. Sorry about that.
Play that again. Yeah, that again is interesting because you not only hear that higher pitched kind of chattery sound, you also hear the going on.
Right.
Once right at the very beginning of the recording, and then it sounds like maybe twice after that higher one. It goes like that.
Yeah.
It's really.
And then at the end, I don't know if you heard like the end part. It sounds like something drumming almost, like I don't know if it was some kind of wood knocking or clacking, but I can't explain what that drumming kind of sound is there.
I'll play that again.
That right there.
Yeah, the first one sounds like boom, like something is like something soft, dense but soft. It like bumps something, followed by a breathy like that.
Right.
It's really, I mean, look, I know that everybody's, when we talk about what could something be that makes a sound, everybody's got a different reference of what they're familiar with. Okay. I don't spend a lot of time in Washington State. I mean, I've spent an awful lot of time in really remote areas in northern Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and northern Minnesota, and Saskatchewan and Manitoba. But most of that is a hunting guide. I am pretty familiar with not just the sounds and vocalizations that most vertebrate mammals will make in those regions, but also the range of sounds that they can make. I mean, people think they know what a bobcat can sound like, but to understand the whole vocal range they're capable of is a little different, you know?
Right. Exactly.
So, you know, there's people that are going to hear this and say, well, that's a known animal, or that's this, or that's that. Everybody bases that on a different reference, you know, a different library of familiarity. But
right. Or somebody might think that's a human doing that, you know, because it has a human tone to it. And the other thing I want to mention is, you know, I think some people are going to think that if you get possible Sasquatch speech, that it's going to sound like the Sierra sounds. Yeah. And I just want to say, I don't think that's always going to be the case. And I don't think people should always think that, oh, Sasquatch only sounds like the Sierra sounds. I personally think the Sierra sounds, if they are legit, they might be either a different type or different tribe of Sasquatch compared to what you're playing here, for example, if these are Sasquatch.
I think you bring up a really good point there, because one, if they are real, the other is that geographically we see it with Native American tribes. Their languages are different. The ways that they communicate are different. Even as humans, the ways that we communicate are different, you know, culturally and geographically. And so, you know, to say, well, just like when people who tried to promote knock theory, you know, well, this is what they do. Well, in your area, that maybe that's something you've come to notice, but to say that is an accepted language format amongst a species all over, that to me would be preposterous. You know, I don't know that you could represent that even as a hypothesis very well, but because of the differences we see in communication in all kinds of different species around. So a lot of areas, there are certain species that, look, a buck deer, a whitetail buck grunting is going to sound the same in Alabama as it does in Kansas, okay?
Right.
But when we're talking about a species or an individual that supposedly has a thinking process that is far in advance of what most animals would be, and we try to compare it to our human ability or those of higher leveled primates and how they communicate, I could see where there could be some differences, and how in I don't think one theory applies geographically all over. If there's different clans or family groups of them, maybe even different, I don't want to say subspecies, but differences in their height and appearance and all of that.
Right.
I don't think you could assume that everything would be duplicated or mimicked the same.
Yeah. Or having the same language, all over that. I don't think that's, I, I don't know if that's really possible to have the same language
No.
like that. For us. Okay, so this one's kind of weird, but
yeah,
yeah,
I think that's an understatement. It's very intriguing,
but yeah, that's recorded in the same spot as the other speech audio you just played up behind our camp area. So down below this hill, there's pretty much our camping spot where we have our tents, and there's a camping fire there. And I was at the campfire with some other Bigfoot researchers and friends. And what we like to try to do is try to draw them in through, we have Native American drums that we play, as well as, we'll sing or, laugh and carry on and be ourselves basically. But we're trying to be like a beacon basically to try to bring these guys in. So what was going on is I had this Tascam recorder up on that hill behind our campsite up there in the woods, assuming that these possible Sasquatch would be coming in and watching us. And so what you're hearing in the background is us playing the drums and laughing and all that. But if you can't, I know it's kind of hard to hear, but closer to this recording is actually, I think, a female voice. And then at the end there, you heard that loud male voice, you
go
raw, raw.
At the beginning, even though you couldn't make out the actual words or projection, that it feels very human element, very syncopated drum beating going on, that you guys are on the fire. And then there's a point where something seems a lot closer to the mic that does sound like a female vocalization of some sort, followed by something quite different. And you could say, well, that's a male. It's obviously different than the first one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because one's higher up than the other one's deeper. So it sounds like a conversation. Like maybe she's asking a question, for example, and he's answering. It sounds like a conversation there. So
yeah, or just a reply to something.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. I mean, yeah, I just thought it was weird. So that's why I kept it.
You almost can hear, I don't want to say, twig breaking, but there's something that you tell there's something present by that camera other than a vocalization. Immediately there's a little creak or a crack or something happens there, followed by that.
Yeah.
Closer. But the nice thing is there's enough audio there of you guys in the distance that you can really establish that you're not close to the mic, that you guys are a ways away from this, which is needed to be able to identify what ends up happening that you can tell is closer to the mic. But then I'll play that one more time here.
Okay. you know, we can hear these sounds from the fire. I mean, this was too far away for us to hear.
Yeah.
The majority of these sounds we never heard from the
How
fire.
surreal is it to go back for you and listen to audio like that, and then and occurring after the fact, but sometimes days after the fact, when you're at home listening to
Oh, yeah.
something and say, "Holy smokes, there was something there," you know? I'm not saying it was a Sasquatch, but something was right by that recorder, you
Else
know?
was there. Yeah, no, it's really crazy, and it's also crazy. Like if I'm out researching and I have a recording going on while I'm researching, and then I get home and listen to it, and I hear something else that I didn't even hear in person while researching. That also surprises me and shocks me. It's like, how the heck did I not hear this in person? But for some reason, the recorder's able to pick it up. So I guess the recorder might amplify sounds around me that I just can't hear. You know, it's able to pick up sounds that for some reason my ears can't pick up when I'm actually there. You have to hear it you have to hear it when you get home.
Yeah. And some of the side chat, I'm trying to keep up with some of that that's going on. Look, I just want to reiterate, you know, one of the things that's important to us here at Untold Radio is that we are going to have different opinions on things. We're not all going to agree on what something could be, or,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
Right.
what the right explanation is, a wrong explanation. We're talking about a subject that has very little facts. Okay.
Yeah,
It's
very
an
little.
awful lot of opinions. And I often refer to us all in the chat and across these different channels as being the students and the professors. We learn from each other, and others are learning from us. And I can tell you the one thing that's required to be able to really learn from somebody is just be respectful. And that's what I ask. You know, if people want to disagree, I'm fine with that. But let's be respectful in the way that we do. I'm gonna play this other one here that this says close chatter.
Same area, man.
Same spot.
Yeah, same spot.
What's your opinion of what you're hearing there? Because there's an awful lot of different syllables being projected.
Yeah, again, I think these guys might be in little groups. You're just hearing possible little conversations amongst each other. And the other thing is, like, if this is a speech, it sounds like there's utterances in between these words. You know, like wah and wah. You hear that kind of thing too.
Yeah, different amplification or projection.
Projections, right. So it's a
So,
real odd kind of a sound.
and again, you know, I'm not trying to push a narrative that this is Sasquatch, okay?
Right.
But I have to ask also the question of, is there anything in your reference that in your mind other than a human that this could be?
I have no, I have no idea, Jeff. I really don't know. I don't even know how a person could think of would try to come up with some of these sounds and able to project some of these sounds. It's like I don't understand like how somebody could think of that. And you know, if somebody's hoaxing me, I mean, they're doing a damn good job of hoaxing me. I don't know who the heck is out there doing that, especially in, like I said, in the circumstances that we're in taking these recordings. There's nobody behind our campsite.
Well,
There's
and
nobody
another thing to
spot.
consider is the distance that these things can pick something up from is
Right.
incredible. So,
These,
one,
yeah,
if
these are really
somebody's
good.
hoaxing you, they've got to be aware of exactly where you hung the recorder, and they need to move to the recorder within that range without making any known human sounds. Like if it's two people, you can't just be talking quietly and, oh, we better be quiet now, we're getting close to the recorder. You could talk at the level that me and you're talking at right now from about 150 yards away from one of these recorders in a lot of the areas that I put them in, you would hear it.
Yeah.
A lot of the wood knocks and the different things that are caught on recorders. Again, not saying that it's Sasquatch that are making them, but these things are being picked up from, you know, a quarter mile away, you know. So I'm going to play this one again so that people can hear it again.
Okay.
It almost has a cartoonish sound, doesn't it? Like,
Yes.
like old school Mickey Mouse show type cartoonish sound to it.
But at the end, did you hear that whoa in the background? Kind of a,
Yeah,
like
I'll
a
play it
response to
again
it?
so people can hear that.
So I don't know. Again, like we've been saying, I'm not saying this is Sasquatch because I don't know what made this. But what the heck is it?
Yeah,
What the heck is it?
I mean, I guess that's what's intriguing to me. Is that it's not me. I can't approach this type of data that you get when you put a recorder out there. Okay. I can't approach that with cautious optimism. It has to be neutral analysis. It has to be you working as hard to prove that it's something other than what that a Sasquatch, as much as you are trying to prove that it is. I mean,
Yeah. Right.
Otherwise, it's going to be a biased. It'd be a great example of where science has found itself now. It's driven by money and agendas. We talked about that this morning. You can't go out with this hopeful, boy, everything I hear is Sasquatch, or it probably is, but let's see if there's anything that proves it isn't. We're not out to prove that something isn't Sasquatch. We're out to prove that something is Sasquatch. And that's difficult to do, as others have pointed out in chat, with audio recordings. It's very hard to prove anything. But you're collecting data that in a lot of cases, the process of elimination is really the element you apply here. For instance, canine howls. One thing canines can't do is roll an A to an O vowel sound or an O to an A vowel sound. And so when you capture canine sounds and you run them through a spectrograph and you start looking at them, you can start realizing definitively in most cases whether or not something is made by a canine. Now, if it isn't, it's not going to tell you what made it if it doesn't recognize that. But we could eliminate something, and that's really what you're doing here. You're peeling the layers of that onion back when you're looking at collecting audio recording. Here's a sound. Sounds kind of like canine, but here's a vowel roll that happens. And so that because I hear that, I'm going to run it through some analysis, and you run it through Wildlife Acoustics or one of these other software programs that identify known libraries of vertebrate animals, mammals. And it says it's not recognizable as one, or it's a canine, or it's a coyote or wolf or bobcat or whatever it thinks it is,
Yeah.
We kind of go in there hoping that it finds out what it is, because if it doesn't identify it as a vocal range for something that's known, it still doesn't prove it's Sasquatch. It just simply leaves a question mark.
Yeah. Just makes more questions, basically.
Yeah.
I also want to mention, like, Chris Spencer mentioned in a comment on a YouTube video that I was, he put up a video a few weeks ago, and I made a comment about it. He mentions in the comment that, some depending on the distance of the subject to the audio recorder, that the audio recorder, the subject might sound distorted sometimes, depending on the distance to the audio recorder itself, like if it's at a certain distance. So, I mean, that's the thing. Like, if you get certain audio recordings of maybe a person talking, it might sound different than what you actually listen to. So, I'm not saying that's the case with these recordings. I'm just saying, when somebody's recording out there, if there's a person at a certain distance from the recorder, that digitally or whatever happens, it might not pick it up as well as it should, and it might sound, distorted in that kind of way, depending on the distance of the subject to the recorder. So I just wanted to mention that because I believe that
Sure.
I believe there's been some recordings I've gotten where it is humans talking, and they're just at a certain distance where it sounds, distorted. But
Sure. Sure.
yeah,
Sure. Now, I can see where that could happen, and especially if a human's alone, whether or not they're hiking or whatever. I mean, we might not be aware of the sounds that we make, but we can make audible sounds that we wouldn't consider to be talking, but we aren't even aware that we make them. Whether it's grunting as you're stepping over something and things like that.
right. Yeah,
But
for sure.
I'm going to play this male voice from the California camp.
That was
Play that again. So that's one that I could easily chalk up to maybe not being as easy to put a question mark on. And the only reason is because the pronunciations that you're hearing are simply kind of like that up and down, up and down, up and down. There really isn't a varied vocal range being displayed, and that could probably be made by a lot of different animals. Maybe it's not, and that brings up another thing. If I say, what sound does a coyote make? 9 out of 10 people are going to kind of mimic the same sound, which really isn't representative to all of the sounds they're capable of making. Okay. You hear a coyote when it gets surprised or alarmed, the yippee sound or the sound that it could make might sound distinctly different than what you recognize a coyote being normally making. And so I only use that as an example to say, maybe that's a woodchuck. And people say, well, I've heard woodchucks make sounds before. It didn't sound like that. Well, you don't know what the circumstances that sound was recorded under either, So there's a lot of different dynamics that can come into play there. But
and also the circumstances with this recording, it was just me and my mother again at this California camp spot, and I had the recorder out on a tree around our campsite. And again, where we were camped, there's no other campers around us in that particular spot. So how it captured that voice or whatever you want to call that, that really perplexed me because it wasn't one of us. So unless there's some person walking around out there in the woods at night around our campsite doing that, that's freaky to think of. But I just thought that was an odd possible voice that I captured, and I can't explain it because it wasn't one of us. It was just me and my mother there.
Well, a lot of times that's all you can really eliminate.
Yeah.
When you're saying what could have made it, well, I can tell you that me and the people that I was with weren't near that audio recording or made those sounds. That doesn't mean that somebody else didn't walk through your campsite at 2 a.m. or near where that microphone is and made that sound. I mean, the only thing we can eliminate is that it wasn't us. It was a remote area. There doesn't seem likely that there was human traffic or presence there, but you have no way to prove that there wasn't.
Nope,
and that's almost even when I find myself literally, I mean, some of the most remote off the grid areas that I've been, I would probably pull every penny out of my bank account and bet that there's not another human being outside of my hunting party within 10 miles of us in some cases. And yet I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So
yeah, me too. I mean, yeah, I could be wrong. Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna see if we can get this one here pulled up.
There's gonna be a loud sound here in the middle of it. Sorry, I should have warned people about that. There's like a loud sound that happens in between this. So if you have headphones on, yeah, that. So
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry for talking. I apologize for talking during that. I just wanted to warn people about that
yeah. If you had
issue
headphones on and
sound.
they were cranked up, you'd be
Yeah.
you did them a favor. Again, I just want to mention, and I'm watching the chat. Okay, I don't want anybody to think I'm blind to that. I don't really want to feature some of the things that are being said in the show simply because I don't agree. And the one person in particular I'm talking about is somebody that I've known for a while. And the idea, I think that me and you have done a pretty good job here prefacing this show and this conversation and the data that you're sharing with people, just audio recordings that you've captured. And I think each time we've played one, we've approached it neutrally, not trying to project that we believe Sasquatch made this sound. It may not be. I think
Exactly.
we've been very transparent on the thinking that we don't know definitively what made this. We just find the recordings intriguing. And
Yeah.
the idea that we're sitting here on a show listening to them is in some way pouring Bigfoot sauce on something, quite honestly, is offensive. It
Yeah.
really is. That you should be ashamed for thinking that way because I don't see that. I think we're being very proactive in approaching these recordings neutrally. And we're simply saying, here's a reference of things that you've captured, you're sharing. And you know what? If you want to see this community where people don't share anything, make more comments like those, because that's what will happen. And I'm sorry if that's a little abrupt, but I don't think that listening to audio recordings like this, talking about the reference of sounds that maybe me and you have of vertebrate mammals that are out in the areas that you captured this in, that could possibly make that. I think we've been pretty upfront about maybe even talking about some of the animals that could have been.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just once we get to a point where there isn't a respectful approach to this, I'm probably going to say something, but I don't want to throw anybody under the bus and say it by name. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, by playing these, I'm not trying to prove anything here. I'm not trying to prove Sasquatch exists by playing these.
no,
Or like
I think everybody here, except for one person, kind of understands that, Tristan.
yeah,
To be honest with
like what you just said, we've been saying we're not saying these are Sasquatch. I'm not saying these are Sasquatch. You guys can interpret these all you want and come up with your own ideas of what they are, if they're Sasquatch or not. And again, I'm not hoaxing these. These are just things I'm recording that are out there. So if somebody's hoaxing me, they're doing a damn good job of doing it, because I don't know what the heck is making these sounds.
Yeah.
So
So under your file for unknown sounds and vocalizations, you've got quite a few here that are like screams and yells. Uh, one of them is like a female sounding woo, things like
yeah,
that. And
check it out.
we don't know what made these, but they're interesting, and it's one of the reasons why you created a Google file and put sound files in here to share with other people. Is that you'd come out and do that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you like, if you like to play some of those, go right ahead.
Well, first, I just wanted to let you know there's an awful lot of people in chat that appreciate the fact that you're here.
Well, thanks.
Sharing this. So,
yeah, and again, I'm not trying to prove Sasquatch exists with these recordings. So anybody coming into this chat expecting that, don't expect that.
I'm
not trying to prove Sasquatch exists here. That's not
one of the files says another zipper vocal. Describe to me what you label as a zipper vocal.
So I've been capturing in some of my recordings, I've been capturing what sounds like a zipper, but I believe it's like a vocalization being emitted. And even on Doug's show, it was brought. I played some of these on Doug's show, and Dave Ellis said that he's also had recordings of these kind of zipper sounds, and people have been recording them around the country as well. So it is.
I'm gonna go ahead and play it here so people can
go for it.
Oh, maybe not.
Do I have to share it with you? I thought that's weird.
It's asking. Oh, maybe I may have accidentally. Let me pull out of here. There we go. I'll play that again. It's pretty quick. It's kind of a scratchy, like
yeah, it's almost like a DJ scratch, but I think that's a vocalization of some sort.
Well, again, you start thinking about what else could it be, and if anybody's got an idea of what else could it be, I think
please let me know.
You're probably the first one to say I'd love to hear what your thought would be.
Seriously, because I've heard that, I've recorded and heard that kind of sound in other areas as well, not just in one area. So if anybody has any ideas what it is.
So this one said female woo, and that's what kind of it sounds like a female-y, and again, don't want to be misleading when you use the descriptors female or male. We're not talking about the species or a human. We're saying probably the reference of a high pitch or a lower pitch,
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know a better way to title it. Or
sure. So those definitely sound like two separate sources of the sounds you're hearing.
Yeah, and that was recorded in that spot where we're getting the previous speech audio that I was talking about.
And if you're using headphones, this is a good example of the multiple microphones capturing directionally, because you really do hear that second sound feels like it's to the right of the first sound. I mean, they don't sound like they're coming from the same position.
Right.
It's not just that they're different. It seems like they're positioned differently from where the recorder is. Wow.
And also the way that what's just, I mean, I'll just call it a female. The way it goes, woo. I mean, it's a very natural sounding woo, and I can't even reproduce that with my own voice, because it sounds like a real natural kind of occurrence for whatever that thing is.
I'll play that one more time. The most interesting part of that is the very end, how it drops out of it. It doesn't. I mean, when you hear a canine or even an animal as it's making a vocalization and it's kind of running out of air, it's kind of running out that chest capacity to drive the sound, that doesn't really sound like what's happening here. It sounds like vocally it's tapering it off, like it's not just running out. It seems like it's on purpose putting a dropping faded end to it. It almost goes to a U at the end, like ooh, you, like it's almost a different sound at the end.
It does.
I'm gonna play it again. That's interesting. Again, I mean, if you force me at gunpoint to make a list of 5 different vertebrate mammals that could make that sound, I could probably come up with some in my mind that could do it. But whether or not it would sound like that, I don't think that in the end, I don't think that it really would. But,
Yeah.
as far as, there's a lot of projection going on there. There's a lot of push, and it doesn't take a big animal to do that. I think that's something that people kind of misperceive or misconceive sometimes, is that these loud, robust sounds must be big creatures. But you listen to a 40-pound lynx or a 50-pound lynx at night, and the sound that it can project, it's hauntingly loud.
Yeah.
I mean, so, bobcats, lynx, mountain lions, then you start looking at the canines of wolves and coyotes and stuff, and all the different things. There's probably things that could hold a steady tone like that.
Yeah.
But that would be one that I kind of want to run through my wildlife acoustic software, because it seems to me that would be one that I would bet on. It might identify it as a known vertebrate animal that can make that sustained sound. But there's been things I've heard tonight in your audio files where I may bet against it, because I just have not heard it. And I've heard an awful lot from most of the vertebrate animals that are in these northern regions. But
yeah, well, I was awake during that when that happened. It was around midnight at the California camp, and I was up at the campfire with another researcher talking. And all of a sudden, that thing just pops off in the woods behind us, up on this hill behind us. And everybody else, as far as I know, everybody else was asleep during this time. So I really don't know who it could be. And that was the only sound where this thing. That was the only sound I heard that night. There was no other sound after that. So
when you hear that sound and you try to place yourself in a tent or sitting around alone outside, you think that is a sound that could be occurring a half a mile away, and I would think I would still hear that pretty easily. It is crazy how sustained and leveled off it is. I mean, that it doesn't vary really in the pitch until the very end. But that's interesting. The sound that has a lighter kind of female feel to it, in contrast to the main sound that you're hearing, is really different. So it sounds like there's a right at the beginning, a short one, and then that louder sound, and then at the end the sound again.
Yeah. So even when that thing goes, whoa, it almost sounds like two individuals.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Too. Yeah.
You can definitely tell this is not one source of this sound. It sounds like 3 different sources. Like there's the sound is a one source, but like you said, that main sound that's in the middle of it sounds like 2 different sources at the same time.
Yeah.
Making it.
And did you notice that thing in the beginning where it goes? I don't even know what's making that sound. That
It almost there's like a bird chirp sound coming in right at the beginning.
yeah, that. Yeah, it might be a bird. Yeah, you might be
That's
right about
interesting.
that.
It's like a whistling kind of sound.
Yeah, and again, we were at the campfire when that happened, and we didn't hear that at all. I mean, the recorder, only the recorder picked that up, and we didn't hear that at all. So, it picks up pretty well. I guess these microphones pick up pretty damn well.
Yeah, it's when I first got the Zoom recorders that I use, and I've got a couple Tascams now, but originally I had bought the Zoom recorders. I was really, really amazed at not just how far they can pick it up from, but how subtle of a sound it was to record.
Yeah,
Even if it was only 20 feet away, just that kind of soft finger snap sounded like it was right in your ear. It's like, dude, how is that picking it up so well? But
so that was picked up in the Blue Mountains. We were camped in the Blue Mountains, and
so there's an intro sound that's short there. It's like a real short one before the main sound that you
yeah,
hear.
it's almost like maybe like a whack or something, like something.
Yeah, that could
like
be
a clonk, some kind of
something
clonk
wet, whack, like a thud sound.
Right. Yeah, like a thud sound. Right.
That's interesting. And you said that was recorded where?
That was in the Blue Mountains. We were camped up in the Blue Mountains, and yeah, we got that on audio. But I don't know what it is. I don't know what's making it.
Yeah. That again, I mean, I've heard black bears make kind of those short, just those sounds like that. But
well, it almost has a deepish quality to it when it goes, oh, it goes, oh. That's how I perceive it as, almost like an apish kind of a sound.
Almost that New Jersey type accent. That doesn't make it seem natural. No offense to anybody from New Jersey, but
I know that's a weird one, but I had the recorder up behind our campsite again, and those are going off, and I heard those in person. I just laid there in my tent listening to those going off behind us. So I can't explain it. I don't know what's making it.
I'm gonna play that one more time. So what's interesting is it doesn't sound canine to me, and the reason why I say that is because canine sounds will often be kind of a monotone, smooth sound that may vary in different pitches, but this almost has that screamy, coarse openness where it sounds like just the way your vocal cords project under, I don't want to say duress, but there's no, like if you hear a woman screaming, let's say, I wouldn't describe it as being like when a canine is howling, it's like a single plane of sound that may vary around the different pitches, but it doesn't sound so coarse and I don't know if that makes a lot of sense if I'm explaining it well, but definitely didn't. At first I started thinking that could be canine, because there's actually a point in it where you almost hear like a yip in that first third of it. But then all of a sudden, when it at around the 10-11 second mark, that sound that carries just doesn't sound canine to me. Now, that's not to say, listen, I've heard lynx and I've heard bobcats in person make screams that sound like a woman's being stabbed to death. I mean, it is crazy how it has more of that type of a sound to it, like it's a feline of some sort that's making it. But
yeah, well, I mean, also people might think those are party goers screaming, and it's like in terms of like the vocal, like, I don't know, like especially that last part where again, I don't know if it's a female, but it has like the high pitched tone to it. It sounds like it really has a high lung capacity, like for it to scream that loud. So, but again, I don't know what's making it. I don't know what's making those those screams.
yeah, it's intriguing, to say the least. Let's look at some of the pictures. So you've got quite a bit of casts, from footprints and hand casts and things like that.
Yeah, and I also have them. I have some of those with me. I can also show you as well.
I'm just going to pull this if we can kind of scroll through these.
Yeah, those were found at the lake there. I don't know. I'm not saying those are Bigfoot. I just don't. I thought they were strange because they don't really have an arch to them, and I think I might have a better picture of those. I'm sorry it's horizontal like that, but they didn't really. That one has a really big toe on it, and I thought that was strange. And
yeah, the length of it, compared to the width, the length seems substantial.
Yeah, and again, I try to look for a lack of an arch. I try to really look for flat-footed and that kind of thing. And the depth of that is pretty good too. So, but again, I'm not saying that's a Sasquatch. Could be anything. And I thought that was weird. The toes look kind of the way they're. I don't know. It's just the way they're aligned up top like that, and the way how flat it is and how fat it is. It just looked odd to me.
Yeah, there's no claws. I mean, this is probably a good print to use some process of elimination. First of all, it's way too flat to be human, and it doesn't look human at all. I mean, but if it was the back footprint of one of the rear legs of a bear, there's no claw marks.
Not that I could see. Yeah.
And a bear's toes typically don't lay in that leveled order like that. There's more curvature to the top. It just, when you look at, well, what could it be? That particular print doesn't start fitting a lot of different slots of possibility. I mean, it just it doesn't fit.
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this was found at a lake, and obviously you see a shoe print there, so people are there too. But
yeah,
that's the other thing too. Like, I think I think it's possible Sasquatch can share the same lake as people do, just at maybe different times of the day, obviously. So
I also think it's possible that a human can step in that. First of all, you see that cracked, but let's imagine that when it was greasy and wet, and
yeah, right, during the time,
could step in something and slide their foot, maybe the back 2/3 of their, from the ball of their foot back to the heel. If that was to rotate without really moving, maybe you've picked up the toes at that point, or that your toes stay anchored. You could make a print appear wider than it really is what I'm saying. But
right, sure.
certainly with no claws being shown at all, it just doesn't fit the spectrum of being a bear in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried to choose pictures of footprints that I thought looked really odd, and because to be honest, like I have a lot of footprint pictures, and maybe most of them might be human, but I mean, I really tried to pick the ones to show on this podcast that maybe might not be, and or just really odd looking. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Oh, let's see here. Well, that's some interesting, real long toes that could
Yeah.
have slid. I mean, from
Could be
where
Sasquatch.
the tips of them. This is interesting because you don't see at the tips of those toes where they were pressed in and then slid. It looks like they were just swiped down like like you would swipe a knife down onto the surface of butter. So
Right.
they were fanned into the dirt a ways before maybe the rest of that track was laid. But that'd be the only way I could come up with an explanation of why the toes would be literally half the length of the track
Yeah, I
or
mean,
a
they
third
almost
of
look
the
like their
length.
fingers, it's really weird looking, and there's also you see that possible mid-tarsal there? I don't know what's going on with that, so
Yeah. And that doesn't look natural from a human perspective. I mean, it's short and, from the front of the back to the front of the footprint to the rear of the print, the length of that break is very short, yet it rises very high.
yeah.
So that's really intriguing. It's interesting. Because this is a good example of a track that doesn't seem to have much there for human element, but as to what we think we know about Sasquatch tracks, it doesn't have much that fits that mold either. So now it
Exactly,
leaves
yeah,
you
it's
wondering,
very
well, what the hell made it?
it's an anomaly, man, I don't know what the heck it is. Yeah,
um, let's see here. So here's another one of those tracks that look really almost unproportionally wide when in reference to the length, but we have toe size that seems to fit a little bit better to the size of the print. But
yeah. I mean, it could be human, but I just again, like, yeah, like what you're just saying, like, the width of it is it looks pretty wide, so I just thought that was strange.
what I think is kind of interesting here is where you identify um the where you identify that rise in the footprint, the break
Yeah,
is predominantly forward on the print, and it does not project to the side and back like you would recognize a human print would. It wouldn't be so far forward and just there. It would you'd kind of see that drawn towards maybe another inch or so towards the back of the foot, maybe.
yeah, like, maybe more in the middle, because I agree, it looks
Yeah,
pretty far up,
it looks really far up.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and again, I thought that was strange, and that's why I took a photo of it. Now, this one I think could be a human footprint. But what I thought was interesting is that I don't really see an arch in it. So I guess human footprints can show maybe no arches. I don't know, but I just thought that
It's
was
pretty
interesting.
flat.
Yeah,
Some of that is going to be the substrate that it's placed in. Some of the substrate that we step on, I think we tend to classify something as a hard surface or a soft surface. And yet I've seen surfaces that, let's say the top half inch is very soft and pliable. And underneath of that, there is a very, very firm gravel type surface that it just you'll put a print into it, but it can only go so deep, so to say. You know what I mean?
right, right.
And so I could see where it could be a human print that just simply doesn't define the mid-tarsal break if it was firm underneath of that soft
Yeah, and
top
the toe
half-inch
alignment
layer,
too.
but
I try to look for prints that have a toe alignment that's more straight across as opposed to like, like a diagonal like what we have. So
yeah.
when I see that, it's kind of like, is that a human print when I see a diagonal or not? It's
Well,
sometimes hard to tell.
what doesn't look human is when you look at the half circle of the heel,
Mhm.
and it's basically a V coming forward. I mean, there is no what you would identify as kind of a human curvature. So if it's a human print, you almost have to assume that maybe there was some sliding or movement once it was on the ground to make the print appear wider than it was.
Yeah, right. Mhm.
But again, I'm not advocating one direction or the other, and I
Mhm.
hate to speculate, but boy, when you're looking at something trying to explain what you think it is, that's simply the conversation we're having, and that kind of leaves a bit of a question mark. Because I'm like you. Originally, you look at that and you say, "Oh, that could be easily a human print," but then you start looking at the shape of it, and
Yeah.
you think a human footprint would not have that outline, and a bear print you would definitely, the definition around the outside of that print, you would see the kind of those tincture marks at the front of it if there was claws on it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but I think a lot of people kind of also misjudge when they think bear print. A lot of times people's minds float to what the print that the front foot of a bear leaves. They don't really understand how long a bear print can be based off that back foot. It is incredibly longer than maybe what you would knee jerk assign to a bear print. But
Yeah, and this print was found near the spot where I had my first recording, um, a little bit up the hill from it. And I'm not saying it's a Bigfoot print, but I thought it looked like a humanoid print, and I thought it was really strange to see that going up going up this hill in this wooded area. So, I mean, I know there's people out there that go hiking in bare feet, but it's like,
I
really?
seen somebody mention it the other day on a different conversation on a different channel talking about how there's a whole community of people who hike barefoot naturalists. And I thought, is there really? And I started searching that. There actually is. I mean,
Yeah.
there
Mhm.
is actually a large number of people who hike barefooted. So you kind of always say, well, yeah, there could be some, but there's actually quite a few.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So,
I,
again, I don't know what this is, so I'm not gonna claim it to be anything because I don't know what it is, so I just thought it was
yeah,
interesting, though, when I saw it.
yeah. When you get into this type of substrate, the difficult thing is identifying double-stepped bear prints. That
Mhm.
gets really hard when you don't have a definitive edge like you do in mud or soft sand and things like that. In those substrates, so usually a double-step bear print is very easy to see. In this type of stuff here, it gets harder.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what this is. It could be a double step bear print, I have no idea, but this particular ground is really hard. It's a really hard ground, so for it to make that kind of impression, I was pretty impressed with it, so
yeah.
and, yeah, that's on a trail too, so oh, and this footprint was found in the area where I found the scat, where my mother found the scat, and she found that in the same area, basically. Not at the same
That's
spot, but the same
interesting.
general area. Yeah, yeah, and she only found that one footprint too, so
The size of the toes, the thickness of them and stuff that seem to be laid out in front of the where the ball appears to be on the foot. It's just really, I mean, I guess when you think Bigfoot, I mean that you don't think little toes, right? I mean, this is
no.
kind of in your mind what that should look like, but again, I don't want to theorize or push people into a false analysis of what may have maybe laid this, but
Yeah, I mean, it could be a human print, I'm not saying not.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of things to consider too. I mean, when you don't have really hard definitive edges like this one does, you have to start thinking, well, could it have been a human print that after it had light moisture or a sprinkling of rain put on it, that everything just kind of eroded and washed away and got a little bit bigger and left what appears to be a bigger print than maybe it was originally,
Right. Mm-hmm.
because and when you would apply that theory is when you don't have hard definitive edges like you see in some of those prints that you were sharing on the earlier ones.
Yeah, this one was in the snow, and I thought it looked like those are toes at the top with that big toe on the right. So I don't know. And it looks like it's flexible too. That looks like a flexible toe or foot. So that's
Well, the heel definitely went in quite deep.
yeah. I mean, it almost looks like it's being bent or something. So I don't know what's going on with that one.
The interesting thing that I find with tracks in snow, and I say this because I live in an area that's covered in snow for about 5 months a year, is that it's really, I get when somebody has a casting or a print that's at a creek bed or at, that substrate of the ground, the ground composition isn't the same all over. That print, here's one that got captured in this one area where there was some mud by the river or whatever, right? When you start talking about snow cover, there really is no reason that there shouldn't be a trackway of prints. And so did you notice other prints in the area or?
Yeah, I think there was one other print, but it didn't come out as good as this. But I only saw at least a couple prints. It wasn't like a trackway of them. So maybe the snow covered them.
Really.
Maybe the snow covered them. I don't know. I don't know why people find one track a lot. I don't know what's up with that because I find the same kind of thing. Why I'm finding at least one track most of the time.
That's been one of my hypotheses up here that I've kind of developed in northern Minnesota is that Sasquatch, once you get to where there are no berries left, there are no anything, and it is the cold, bitter last half of the winter, you're going to get to a point where getting out and moving around and, if you had a cache of food even, it's probably starting to get depleted or spoiling or whatever. At what point, if they're really trying to be elusive and undetected, at what point would they go out and move around in snow cover to pursue a large game animal? I would have to try to say that the most plausible explanation there would be on the very front side of an incoming snowstorm. I mean, if you're projected to get a couple inches of snow overnight, whether or not they can feel or sense that barometric pressure switch, be able to tell that it's going to snow, maybe they're comfortable laying their trackways in pursuit of an animal, knowing that in 4 to 6, 8 hours, there's going to be 4 or 5 inches of snow over those tracks and you aren't going to be able to see them anymore.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Maybe there's little windows that they find on the front side of those snowfalls where they know whatever print they left is not visible really that well. But
that's a good point.
So and then also, I know Leon has an awful lot of experience looking at tracks in snow, Leon Thompson. And, he's, when it comes to moose tracks, even the size of a moose track, and you start talking about 1 or 2 tracks laid like people would call a double bear print. You start looking at 2 moose tracks in the snow at the same end. Some of those impressions are really intriguing when you first look at them, if you don't understand what you're looking at. But
yeah. Yeah, I think that might have been another one of the same ones, or maybe that's a different angle. I don't know. Yeah, I just thought it was strange. I don't know.
Yeah, it's if you look at how that imprint is around, well, I don't know if you can even see my cursor on this, but the top edge here of the picture, how there's dirt and, whatnot in that print as it goes around the heel. It's in the heel indentation. And then you look up where you would imagine toes to be, and that doesn't exist there.
Yeah.
You start, and you can see areas that look like they could be toes, but yet they really aren't definitively imprinted there, So
Yeah.
again, you've got something here that causes you more of a question mark than anything else. But
Yeah. I mean, I was looking for a point, like if somebody had a boot, I was looking for a point, but it kind of
yeah,
just squares off there. So I thought that was, I don't know, I'm perplexed. Yeah, I'm perplexed too. I mean, that does look pretty deep where the heel is.
I wrestle with the whole, finding 2, 3, 4, 5 prints in snow without there being a detectable trackway. And then you start saying, well, what's the explanation of that? Because that leads into a difficult area. As a researcher who always starts out at the flesh and blood standpoint, you start having to consider a supernatural aspect or a Ron Moorhead quantum Bigfoot aspect. That's not where I start trying to analyze this stuff. And so that, to me, if there's only 4 or 5 prints out there, or 2 prints or 3 prints, you start saying, well, could they have been hoaxed? Well, now you got to show me where the human footprints are around them to get out there to hoax it, and
for sure.
It's really strange. You get into some high strangeness when you only have a partial trackway in snow like that. But
I agree. There's another weird one. I don't know.
Yeah, very wide. The toes are definitively got some length to them, or they're swiped, but
there might be some slippage there. Yeah. But again, I don't see an arch. I mean, I guess for me, I always try to look for an arch.
Yeah.
As a giveaway, but when I'm not seeing it, I'm like,
Well, when you see the shoe that's next to it, I mean, I can say in this print, it's the proportion of it, the width of it, the length of it, nothing about the toes that leads me away from this being a human print, other than why isn't there more of a defined arch in it? Seems like I'm not saying that a human couldn't lay that without it appearing for whatever reason to have that arch, but it seems like it should be there.
Yeah, exactly. That's it confuses me. That was a better picture. And again, like, I don't see any arches in these feet. So, I mean, it could be human feet. I'm not ruling that out, but
it's interesting the depth and how muddy it must have been for them to get that kind of depth into it, considering that they aren't any longer than, a medium to small medium human foot,
Yeah.
But you see how that mud is rolled over on that right print. You realize how deep that was.
Yeah, I know. I just thought that was strange.
Yeah, there isn't. I can't say that there's anything there that sets off the whole the Bigfoot intuition there, but there's little missing elements there that make it easily attributable to a human print is the problem.
Sure. That print in particular, like I don't know who would walk in barefoot in that kind of, like all this, like all the wood there and everything. Like, I wouldn't want splinters in my feet walking in that.
Yeah, I used to ask myself that too, but then you start realizing, some of these outdoor shows. What was the one where they had the long-haired guy with the dreads that went barefoot everywhere, and he had the military friend who was always the tactical guy?
Oh yeah.
That survival show. You realize some of the crazy stuff that guy walked through in his bare feet. So at that point, I kind of not rule it out. But Plus,
Sure.
I've got really tender feet. I mean, for me, if I walk across gravel in my feet, boy, that's uncomfortable. Whereas other people,
Yeah.
doesn't really bother them. So I've got some friends that walk across gravel and doesn't even change the look on their face, you know?
Yeah, like they'll walk across coals or something, hot coal.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
That's one that my mom took. I don't know what's going on. No, these prints were really. I found these prints in November of 2015 and at a lake, and it was really freaking cold that day. So whoever is barefoot walking out there is like, wow,
yeah.
I'm impressed. But again, like I thought the shape of these was weird, and obviously like the big toe and everything. I didn't. I just
Yeah,
thought it was
that
really
big
weird
toe
looking.
there, it almost looks like it could be washed out at the base of it, you know?
Yeah, it could be because there was water inside them. So
Yeah, you can see there's water, but that weird indention that kind of leads into where the ball of the foot is, it feels like maybe water kind of pulled that, like it just drained from across the outside of the footprint to the inside of the footprint and just washed that out as it pooled into that toe, maybe. I don't know.
that's a good idea. I mean, yeah, that's a good theory. I didn't even think about
You
that.
can kind of see right, through. I don't even know if this is. Yeah, I guess you can kind of see it on the screen there. It looks like there was water traveling right from the toe up through here and then
Oh,
across that print a little bit. And it gets deeper and deeper the further it runs. So maybe that was just kind of washed in. But again, brings you to the original question. If it's that cold out there, what the heck's a human doing in bare feet? But
yeah.
I can't. The most unpredictable thing that exists in this world is probably human behavior. So I can't
I mean,
say that
I'm not gonna rule out
it
human beings,
doesn't.
but I'm not gonna rule it out, but it's just weird, and I mean, people
Is
have
that the
different.
same print there?
Well, it's from the same. Yeah, it's from the same area there. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because if it's the same area but a separate print, again, you see where it looks like water washes out here. It would have had to have done the exact same thing on this print to create this elongated big toe indention that actually travels into the ball of the foot area, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Right. Right.
It,
Yeah.
wa- so now it makes you think, well, that's the shape of the foot that left it rather than it washing out because it's happened twice exactly the same. But who knows? I hate how my mind starts looking at question mark, question mark, question mark, trying to figure out
I wish I could
what's
explain
the
it.
plausible explanation here. And it's like,
I
you don't want to get
don't know.
scatterbrained going over it. You sometimes you just have to look at it and say there's not enough data to draw any conclusion. But um, here's a trackway where you can see 3 prints in a row there.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they're in like a tightrope and they're pretty far space between each other. So
Yeah,
that's why.
they're borderline reverse tightrope. If that first print is a left foot, that second print is almost placed an inch to 2 inches
Oh yeah,
inside of that. Like there's a little bit of that cross-legged gait to it, but that's interesting.
yeah,
That's the perfect substrate though to be finding tracks in.
yeah. That lake is like perfect for tracks. It has great detail and everything.
It's just enough mud that you can capture a track without it getting, some of that stuff when you pull your foot out, it like cakes it out with it. So it doesn't leave a nice defined print. And gotta have just enough clay in it and all that, to get the perfect storm.
Oh
But
yeah, you can get the perfect. Yeah, and
again, you got
a lot of slippage in a lot of those mud prints. With the
yeah.
makes it look like long fingers on them. So I
Huh.
thought that was interesting. Like yeah, like that print. I mean, it almost looks like a primate kind of a print.
Yeah.
It's just really weird.
Who's taking their monkey out for a walk in Washington in the cold?
You got me. And that was found at one of our campground or one of the campsites that we were at that lake. And I actually casted that. Let's see if I can get it real quick. It's 11 and a half inches, but that's what it looks like.
Wow.
You know, it's right there in the camp. I mean, if you see how, I mean, that was really deep in the dirt, and that soil is not like, you have to be very heavy to make that kind of impression in the dirt. So, but yeah, that's what it looks like. You know, it's got like the fanned out possible toes and skinny heel. I noticed that that's a common thing there. That, you know, you get a lot of skinny heels and fanned out toes.
Well, this has been an interesting evening, man. I enjoyed listening to the audio. I love seeing the pictures that you were sharing in the file here. And so what do you got planned in the summer? I mean, more of the same, or?
Yeah, we have a couple of Bigfoot groups that we like to go camping with, and we're definitely going back to that area where I got the chorus audio and the speech audio. So I'm really excited to get back in that area, because honestly, the last year we had some forest fires and that kind of messed things up, and so I'm hoping that actually the year before 2021 we had some forest fires, and so I think that might have disrupted things, and I'm hoping that things will come back now, and you know, maybe we'll get some more activity again. But activity kind of stopped for a little bit, but I'm hoping that will come back again. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. So I guess some of the questions that I would have is like, now, are you still going to be? Do you put any cameras out in these areas when you put audio recorders out, or?
Yeah, we put out plot watchers. I don't know if I don't know if you quickly want to play that one plot watcher of the thing running all fours. It's under,
pull it up here.
It's under go under video, and it's called Sasquatch on all fours. I'm not saying it's a Sasquatch, but yeah, that's a plot watcher video. Sasquatch on all fours under video. I don't know if you see it there. Yeah, I think it's the second one. But we put out plot watchers, and those are like time-lapse cameras. They'll take a picture every 5 seconds, and then when you view it back on your computer, you might have to blow it up.
Okay, let me get this started over here.
Sure. Hopefully it'll work.
Yeah, it's just going to buffer for me here. There we go. Oh, it's going to keep doing it. I tell you, sometimes when I have StreamYard open and YouTube and playing a video, it's just like, you think you got a pretty high dollar computer, and then you're like, well, how come we can't do this? You know?
Yeah, exactly. So we had this plot watcher up on a tree, and it was pointed at the spot where we were seeing a lot of foot traffic, a lot of impressions and prints, and so we put a plot watcher at the spot, and we caught this thing on this plot watcher, and to me, it looks more like a gorilla on all fours. It doesn't really look like a bear to me, and but I'm not saying it's a Bigfoot. But yeah, that's like my frame 452 right there in the middle. So yeah, when you view it back, it's like a slideshow. It's not like a full video, because that's what a plot watcher does. It's like a time lapse.
Yeah.
But yeah, I understand the buffering issues. It's all good.
Yeah, I really thought maybe it would go away and start playing it, but there you can see it right there.
Yeah. So I thought it looked like it has a head and shoulders, and more like a humanoid form as opposed to maybe a bear. But I know it's pixelated. I know it's blurry. I'm not, but I just thought it looked interesting. But those are the kind of cameras we like to put out, and because when we put out game cameras, we do get that whiteout or blackouts on them, and whatever's causing that, I have no idea. But we kind of We still use game cameras, but not as much as plot watchers because we think plot watchers might have better luck at capturing something. But the downside to plot watchers is that they don't record at night. They only record when there's sunlight or light. So hopefully you'll get something during the day. But yeah, I do. But yeah, we do put those out as well, but not everywhere, just in certain areas.
Sure.
So.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing all this with us, Tristan. I look forward to having you on again.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
And I definitely appreciate when you ask questions and part of the conversation and chat. I appreciate your support of the channel. So
thank you. Yeah, no, I enjoy it. I enjoy doing that.
All right. Well, you have a good rest of your week. And if you want to hang out backstage, I'll talk to you just for a minute here after I land this plane. So
sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So another episode. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I did. I mean, look, again, nobody's here saying that recording is Sasquatch or that audio is this or that. Simply trying to look at what it could be. Is there obvious, plausible explanations of what it could be? I enjoy hearing audio like that. I understand that there are people out there who has a hard time trying to consider different options that are outside of the wheelhouse that they're subscribed to sit at the seat in. So I get that. But also, I think that it is necessary to be respectful to each other and be able to convey our differences in a respectful way. I really do feel that if we aren't careful how we have these discussions and that you're going to end up with more people like Tristan who are collecting data. I'm not going to call it evidence. I don't think he would call it evidence. It's not evidence that Sasquatch exists. It's data to consider. What is this? What are we hearing here? What are we looking at? And if we aren't willing to look at that type of data and at least expand our reference of things we've heard or things that we've learned by listening to them, two things are going to happen. One, we're not going to move the ball because we're just going to keep existing in the corners of the room that we exist in. And two, you're going to have an awful lot of people out there that are collecting data that aren't going to come and share it with anybody. They aren't. And that's sad. I don't want that to be the case. I would rather have people out there sharing data that they've collected, even if I hear it and say there's no way that's Sasquatch and that's my opinion. I'd rather they share it than go out and ridicule them for sharing it or ridicule anybody for having that conversation. And now what have we done? We certainly haven't encouraged anybody to share data that they collect. We've actually given them a reason why not to. And I think that is ridiculous. So I appreciate everybody's support here of Untold Radio Network, support of Pine Island Research. We will be back again next Monday night. It should be a fun show. And also we will be back Monday morning. I'll be doing coffee time again at 11:30 Eastern a.m. Next week on Monday. But until then, I hope everybody stays safe. I hope these this bad weather, anybody who's experienced any property damage or anything like that, and living in these areas that have had the tornadoes down in Mississippi, Georgia, and a few of the other areas, I hope that not only are you guys are helping your community bounce back, but that we get some better weather coming your way. So thank you so much again for joining. And we will see you next week.